Welcome in, folks, for this week's episode of What's Bruin, brought to you by our friends over at Ice Shaker. Check them out at iceshaker.com. Gotta love these water bottles here. Just check them out. That's all I can tell you. Dom, how are you this week?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you? Hope you had enough sleep and are well rested and ready to go.
Uh, I, I yeah, it helps that there's not as many NHL games to watch, but this Four Nations tournament, man, it has been, I think, way better than a lot of people anticipated, and it has been worth the watch. What
Yeah, a
about you?
lot
What are your
a
thoughts?
lot of people thought this was just a gimmick and stuff and they wouldn't be watching. I'll tell you what. I've watched every best on best tournament since the 1972 Summit Series, and this ranks right up there as one of the best so
Yeah,
far. That
yeah,
that game between Canada and the US last night had everything. Who expected three fights in 9 seconds?
no, I don't know. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card. Most people might have picked one.
Yeah. Now, if I had any regret, it's that it wasn't Matthew instead of Brady going up against Bennett. That would have made it even more interesting.
That
But
would have been awesome. But yeah, I mean, and then on the heels of or that game came on the heels of the Sweden Finland game, which was also an
yes.
awesome game to watch.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what to say to anybody who thought this was going to be like an all-star game where there was no there have been some massive hits. You look at McAvoy twice on McDavid and twice on Crosby. Um, Not just those. There have been some big hits
Oh yeah.
throughout this tournament. To say that it was going to be like the all-star game, it just wasn't true.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those where I was coming into it going, I want to watch it. I want to see what it is. If the hockey turns out to be crap because they're playing it like an all-star game, then fine. I can always change the channel and turn it off. I don't have to watch it. But with what we've gotten, it's been nothing but I mean, this is true. I mean, I know it's only four teams, but true best on best. And I don't know if you could have picked four other nations to do this tournament with. Um,
Look, look, this is a one-time thing. They've already committed to going back to the World Cup of Hockey um, with 8 teams on alternating every 2 years with the Olympics. It doesn't matter what level of hockey it is, with the exception of maybe the Halinka Gretzky in August, because that's one that Canada seems to own. Uh, Best on best, whether it's the Olympics, World Cup of Hockey, World Juniors, is always the best hockey, bar none.
yeah. Couple ways I want to go over it though. You mentioned Charlie McAvoy laid out a couple big hits. Um, do you think this is an opportunity for him to really find what's been missing from his game and you know maybe come back from the break for the Bruins a better player than when he left for this
Absolutely.
season? I mean,
Absolutely. Anybody who thinks that uh, it's not, then I don't know what to say. But this is his opportunity to turn around what has been a mediocre season for him.
now I think on the flip side, we're not seeing the tournament that we wanted to from Elias Lindholm.
No. Again, like I've talked about it ad nauseum. Uh, the guy's been through 3 teams, 4 different systems, 4 coaches in a year.
Five, if
It's
you
a
now
lot of
throw this
results.
one in.
Yeah, you want to throw this one in? That's 5. To me this year Um, when it comes to Elias Lindholm, is I don't know. It's a pause for me. It's yeah, he's getting a mulligan from me. I want to see where he's at next season.
Yeah, I don't know how you can really look at it as anything else. And let's be real, it's not exactly like he's the lone black hole in the Bruins lineup either.
Well,
Like,
people can look at it any way they want. They're entitled to their opinion. That's just I'm not going to make any definitive um, ideas of it. Black. It's a black and gray area. It really is. Let's just wait and see.
yeah. Again, it's not like he's the only black hole in the lineup for the Bruins either.
No,
So it's not exactly like he's got players around him who are constantly there picking him up and dragging him into the game. It's just not the case. So I'll hold off on judgment on him. What have you thought on Brad Marchand for Team Canada?
well, I think John Cooper waited too long to move him up into a top six role last night. Not that it would have made any difference for Team Canada, but that's where he belongs.
I mean, he's a top six player. So, yeah, Kevin jumping in the comments saying, "What up, Dan McAvoy is having a great tournament so far." Kevin, I got to hear from you, my man. What have you thought of the tournament? Because I'm pretty sure you said you weren't going to be watching. So, I got to ask you though, Dom, if you're Canada or not, if you're Sweden, going forward, are you going with Linus Ullmark in net?
Um,
Or would you go back to Philip Gustafsson?
I don't think at this point it makes any difference, but um, it's not even a must-win game for them because they have no mathematical shot of being in the finals. So, I'd probably go back with Gustafsson.
I mean, if they get the regulation win, or are they? Yeah, if they get a regulation win, Canada would have to lose in the shootout or just lose in general for them to pass them in the standings. But
And then Finland, if they lose to Finland, then Finland takes it.
oh yeah, they would have to have Finland lose in overtime, I think.
And then Canada would win, and then Canada would take it.
Yeah.
I don't think Sweden has a mathematical chance.
Let's see, because they would have to beat the U.S. and then if Canada and Finland both go to, oh, that's right, because they would have the tiebreaker.
Or yeah, remember it's a 3-2-1 point system too.
Yeah, so they would have the tiebreaker. They would lose the tiebreaker against either Finland or Canada. So even if they got the win in regulation, still almost impossible for them to get in. So, which, I mean, overall though, the tournament's been fantastic, as Kevin said. It's a great way to ease us back into best on best. I think overall, when it comes to the Bruins, I mean, Jeremy Swayman is going to get his chance to open that door at some point, you think? If you're the U.S. against Sweden, do you go to anybody other than Connor Hellebuck in net?
No. Like to lose to Sweden, I think would be not demoralizing, but it would be a letdown for the Americans. You go with who's gotten you there. It's not like they're playing every day, and because the finals Thursday?
Yeah, they got 2 days off.
2 days off. So why switch what's working for the U.S. right now?
And for Canada, what did you think of the
goaltending's their problem?
I was going to say, what did you think of the option to go with Binnington over Aiden Hill?
This is the problem for Canada. Everybody knew about it going into the tournament, that it would be what would kill them. And he let in 2 goals last night that he should have had.
Yeah.
On the same token, their best players got to be their best players. Like first game, I thought McDavid was superb in the first period, and not so much in the second and third. Crosby shows why he is still one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
That said, Binnington could have made those 2 saves, but if you're only scoring 1 goal, you don't deserve to win.
Yeah, especially when you have Marner, McDavid, Point, Marchand, McKinnon, Hagel, Crosby, all in your forward lineup, and you only get 1 goal in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That is honestly the bigger surprise. So Kevin says only 1 goal was soft. Larkins was legit. Which, I mean, you still, if you're one of the best 3 goaltenders in your country, that's a goal that you shouldn't be letting up.
That first one doesn't beat him. If he was set, he was too slow getting down. His stick wasn't even in position.
Yeah.
Same with the second one. The problem for Canada is, and it's still an issue, it's been a long time since they've developed a top-notch goaltender. Now,
a lot of people were projecting Adin Hill would be their starting goaltender for this series. And then obviously Logan Thompson wasn't even put on the roster. Now, some are saying it's because 2 of the coaches said that they didn't want him on the roster. Thoughts on that whole situation? One, do you think it was the right move going Binnington over Hill for the 3 that they have? And then what are your thoughts on them having left off Logan Thompson in the first place?
Again, ideally, none of the 3 would be your starting goaltender. This is a country that produced the likes of Martin Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, Marc-Andre Fleury. Where have they been in the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Who is that guy? You go through the history of goaltenders that this country has produced. They have, Jacques Plante, Tony Esposito, Ken Dryden. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I'm with you.
They haven't produced a goaltender like that in over 20 years. And I'll tell you what the issue is. One, it's too expensive. 2, if you take the Europeans, countries like Finland, Sweden, Russia, who develop top-notch goalies all the time, their system works. They have goalies going up from when they're kids to when they turn professional with the same coaching staff. They're all on the same level playing field, and that's all they're dedicated to is playing goaltending.
Yeah.
And they pay for it.
Oh, sure. But you also notice they're all very technically sound as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's why.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got 2 games left. I'm glad they strayed away from the original All-Star game, the way that it's been going the last couple of years. That the clips of Nikita Kucherov walking his way through last year's All-Star competition have been floating back around out there, and I'm so glad we got this instead.
This has nothing to do with the All-Star game or replacing the All-Star game.
No, I'm saying I'm glad they opted to do this instead
the All-Star game will be back.
I know.
It will be back as early as, well, it won't be next year because next year is the Olympics, the year after. This is happening because A, the players want best on best, and B, it's a teaser for the Olympics for next February, and it's a teaser for the World Cup of Hockey in 2028. That's all it is.
No, I know. I'm saying the fact that they designed the tournament and they slid it into this spot instead of the All-Star game weekend, I'm very much okay with that decision. So, Steve jumps in and says defense wins championships. U.S. has a better defense. Still cheering for Canada, but U.S. is going to win.
Steve, this is the best American team in a best-on-best tournament that has ever been put together, from goaltending on out.
I will say that I do want to ask this question, though. Do you think yesterday's game changes at all when it comes to the offensive abilities of Canada if Cale Makar is in the lineup? Because he gives such a dynamic option from the back end.
I don't know if it'll make much of a difference offensively. He's the one guy that can single-handedly break the American forechecking game and escape it. And nobody can transition like he can. Maybe Quinn Hughes is on that level. But Canada's got nobody else like him that can do that for him.
I feel like that was a big loss for him in the game yesterday, not having him out on the ice.
Look, I don't use injuries as an excuse. Like any NHL team, you have to play through it.
Oh, absolutely. And Canada didn't.
These are the best players in the world. It's hard to replace a Cale Makar, but you have to.
You got to find a way.
Yep.
So, but it will be interesting to see. I still think we'll have U.S. and Canada in the final. It just seems like we're destined for that.
I'm not so sure about that.
Who do you think Finland may make it?
I'm saying Finland could beat Canada. Yes,
it could, but I don't know. I feel like their defense is too weak at this point.
They gave the Americans a run for their money until the third period.
Yeah. I don't know. The defensive grouping for Finland against that offense, that potent offense for Canada, especially after having just lost to the US, I just don't see it. I think Canada's going to try to blow them away.
I think it comes down to goaltending. And I don't have faith in the Canadian goaltending.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like Finland has found that they're going to stick with Lankinen. I don't see why they would change from that. He played better than Saros did.
Yeah.
And right now it sounds like Cooper's playing it close to the vest between who's going to be their starter. If they make a change, it's not like they're going to anybody who sucks. I mean, Adin Hill is still a solid goaltender. I would be more worried if they stick with Binnington, honestly.
Look, any way you break it down, are any one of the three Canadian goaltenders, literally, are any one of the three a top 12 goaltender in the world?
No.
And that's what they have for their three goaltenders.
What, you think in Finland?
No, Canada.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I feel like everything else is so in favor of Canada, though. I will be interested to see, though, how Mikko Rantanen comes back from this break. Speaking of Finland.
Let me ask you this. When you look at the Finnish goaltenders, the Swedish goaltenders, and the American goaltenders, there's 9 of them, correct?
Yep.
Would you consider any of those 9 goaltenders among the top 12 goaltenders in the world?
Yes. I would definitely put Hellebuck in there. Saros has a case, and when he's healthy, Linus Ullmark has a case. Jeremy Swayman, when he's on his game, has a case.
So all three teams have a top 12 goaltender in the world, and Canada does not.
And a very underrated goaltender for Finland in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's getting a lot of the treatment that Linus Ullmark got when he was in Buffalo.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, talk about a Hail Mary. I mean, if you're Finland, why not? You know the guy's going to be hungry to play.
Look, I'm not making excuses for Canada, but I could literally see them losing tomorrow night.
I can see it. I just don't. I don't know. It's so hard for me to pick against them, just because of Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon, Marchand, like just that offense. You know what I mean? Michael jumps in and says Canada's goalie is in Washington, Logan Thompson. So what did you think of them leaving him off? Obviously, the teams were picked 3-4 months ago. For the most part, they were finalizing. A couple of the coaching staff members sound like they may have had issue with Thompson from when he was in Vegas. What do you think? Anything to it?
I'm not privy to any of that, so I'm not going to speculate.
I don't know if Thompson really elevates this goaltending group by that much. He's just having a really good year and with a really good team in front of him.
Yeah, he still wouldn't be a top 12 goaltender in the world. And it goes back to the issue this country has had developing goaltenders for over 20 years.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people forget that at the age of 27, he only has 134 NHL career games under his belt. So it's not like he has this very long 500 NHL game of track record to show that he is what he is. He's played less than 200 games.
I'd rather have Marc-Andre Fleury there.
I feel like they should have put him on the roster. If for nothing else, it gives you an experienced international goaltender in the room to help in the room. I mean, Jeremy Swayman's played more games than Logan Thompson has in the NHL. So
yeah,
I don't think people realize that just because Thompson is only a year older than him. So, but I like what the break has been able to do for the Bruins. It's given them some time to sit back, kind of take their step back. I think the guys who needed the tournament, Marchand, McAvoy, I don't really say Swayman needed the tournament, but I think it'll do him some good to be around, the Connor Hellebucks of the world in that locker room. I think that'll really do him some good to be in that atmosphere. And even Elias Lindholm, I know he's not playing as great as we want him to, but I think it's a way for him to maybe get out of his own head. Get around some of his fellow countrymen. He's not playing. This isn't a pressure situation for him, so he can just find his enjoyment of hockey and hopefully bring that back to Boston with him.
Look, there's nothing better than being in a winning atmosphere. I've said it a million times. Being in a winning atmosphere is fantastic for a hockey player, and that's what Jeremy Swayman is in right now.
Yeah, and it helps that he's sharing with Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuck.
Mm-hmm.
So Michael says, I thought it was weird that Harley, who plays in Dallas, was called before Ekblad, Nurse, and Hamilton.
I'm not surprised about Hamilton for obvious reasons. If I need to go into them, then Michael, not to be offensive or anything, you've been sleeping under a rock. And I can understand why not Nurse. Ekblad is kind of curious about him, but, Ekblad, Harley is closer to what Cale Makar brings than Aaron Ekblad is. And I think that's what they were trying to bring, is somebody who could replace some of, not replace, but replace some of what Cale Makar brings to the table, and Ekblad is not that player.
That's what I was thinking when they made the call for him, and they also weren't even sure they were going to need him. That's why they sent him to Boston first. What have you thought about how the NHL has handled the replacement players overall for this tournament? I know it's a one-time tournament, so it's not like they're setting this massive precedent for this thing going forward. But what are your overall thoughts with it?
It's the way it should be handled. Absolutely nothing wrong with it, because we all know injuries are going to happen.
All right, I got Kevin's comment here, and I got to ask you. He says, with how McAvoy is playing in this tournament, we need Mike Sullivan behind the Bruins bench. With the way this tournament is going, does this make you want to see the Bruins look at Mike Sullivan should he become available?
Yeah, but I don't think it'll ever happen.
I think there's too much on his contract. I'm not sure if Fenway Sports Group moves off of him right away. It doesn't make a lot of sense for them to move off of him in Pittsburgh.
I don't think it has anything to do with that. I don't think Mike Sullivan has any interest in going back to Boston.
That too.
They didn't part on the best of terms, and why would he want to go back?
I never saw it from the beginning, unless you're willing to massively overpay him, and that just isn't in the Jacobs makeup to extend excessively on a coach or anybody. So it just never made sense to me in that regard. I think X's and O's wise, he'd be great to have, but
I don't know. Jacobs has paid for named coaches before. Pat Burns, Mike Keenan, Claude Julien.
But were they previously fired from the same ownership group? Were they on a second term?
That's why I'm saying the only issue to Sullivan coming back is Sullivan. Why would he want to come back after the way he was treated?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think money fixes a lot of those types of things, but when you already have a great contract and you're making good money, you can turn down money.
Yep.
So, yeah, as Kevin says, I don't see him coming back either. Bruins will have to look elsewhere. That's if they determine Sacco's not their guy. So that's still up in the air as well. I'm not 100% satisfied with what he's done, but at the same time, I mean, we've talked about it all season long. This team is underperforming for the guy. So
yeah. Well, but they need a change.
And with that, we've got the trade deadline coming up. A little less than a month away now. A couple names were thrown out during one of the broadcasts the other night. A couple names that we've talked about before. Trent Frederick's name keeps getting brought up. Morgan Geeky's name has been brought up. And Brandon Carlo's name got thrown out there. I'm still of the mindset that you don't trade or move Brandon Carlo at a minimum till the offseason.
Who threw out Brandon Carlo's name?
I believe it was mentioned in the broadcast by Emily Kaplan. Now,
TNT or is that ESPN?
That would be, I believe, ESPN.
Because here I watched a normal broadcast with Sportsnet.
Again, I don't move on from Carlo. Honestly, I would try to re-sign the guy. I think he's one of the most underrated defensive defensemen in the league. Boston Bruins fans don't appreciate him enough.
No, they don't. I'm not trading Brandon Carlo.
I think as soon as he's eligible, you try to extend the guy, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is 2 years. He's got 2 years left at $4.1 million.
Now, we've had the conversation before, though. I mean, if someone calls and asks for Brandon Carlo, I'm not hanging up the phone. I'm listening to what they're offering. And if there's a deal to be had, there's not.
Look, let me
not many guys out there like Brandon Carlo. And I'm sorry, he is not. I was listening to a show earlier today that tried to compare him to Brendan Dillon, and he is 10 times the defenseman that Brendan Dillon is.
Let me explain it this way. with the cap going up next year, huge increase, to find a player of Brandon Carlo's ability, what we know his ability can be, you're not getting him for $4.1 million.
No.
And you've got him for $4.1 million for the next 2 years after this one. You don't trade him unless an offer knocks your socks off.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we've had that conversation where, people like to throw out trade proposals, and you got to ask yourself, why would another team do it? Why would the Boston Bruins move on from Brandon Carlo?
Because you need to replace him, and you're not replacing him for $4.1 million because there is nobody in the system that can come up and take his place right now.
And he's only 28 years old. It's not like he's 35.
In the system. There is nobody in the system that can come and take his place. So you're trading him for something. I don't know what the rumor is. I really don't give a shit what the rumor is.
Return wasn't discussed. It was just his name had been coming up. And my guess is
you're going to have to go. You're going to have to go spend $6 million to replace him. What's the benefit in that?
I don't see it. I don't. I don't think Don Sweeney's dumb enough to do it. Now, if you're going to trade away a right shot defensive defenseman, you might be looking at Andrew Peeke, but because he's got a year less on his deal, I just don't see as much of a return there. I don't know why you would deal away from your defensive unit right now. I mean, we've already seen what happens when Hampus Lindholm goes down with an injury. If anything, you need to add another left shot defenseman to your system who can help with your depth. Now, the case that they're getting by, no, they're getting through. They're getting through without Hampus Lindholm. You got to get him back. I'm excited to see him return. Hopefully, right after the break is over, he's able to return to the lineup. You got something?
Here's my thing with Hampus Lindholm returning. Okay, so we know they sent Matthew Poitras and Mike Callahan to Providence to get playing time during the Four Nations break. Okay. Yep. Matt Poitras played yesterday. Mike Callahan played yesterday. Neither one of them played Friday, and neither one of them played today. So they send him down to play one game. I have a bad feeling Mike Callahan is going to be back up because Hampus Lindholm is not ready, or else he would have played in more than one game because Providence played 3-3 this weekend.
Yeah. I don't get why they only played them both in the one game, but I maybe I
could have played him Monday, or could have played him Friday and today.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder if maybe the move was more for cap consideration than, like you said, the return.
No, it was to get them playing time.
I don't know. I think Callahan helps your left side, but you got to really see what you have in your defense when Lindholm comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any idea when that's going to be.
No
one said anything.
I was hoping he would have got a game or two in before the break. Obviously, that never happened.
Yeah. Let's see. And then I know a lot of people are trying to fantasize a trade of getting rid of Jonas Korpisalo, which doesn't make any sense to me, at least right now. Because anybody that's going to trade for him is either bottom of the standings and they're not going to help you right now, or a team is going to be looking to redo their goaltending room, and that's an off-season thing.
Or, like I said last week, somebody has a severe season-ending injury that's a playoff team.
That's the only other scenario in which someone's calling looking for him, but so far that hasn't happened.
It's the only time somebody's calling looking for him.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're trying to sell him off, and I'm sorry, but you can get more for him if you wait. And it's not like having your backup goaltender signed for the next 3 years is a bad move. Especially with the cap going up. You already mentioned it. So, real quick, Michael commented on our Brandon Carlo chat. He said Carlo doesn't get enough credit, such as Coyle, who doesn't either. We'll circle back to Coyle as well. And then Cam says, hey, guys, any truth to the Kreider and Othman for Frederick rumors? Dom, I know that you had sent a tweet out about this, so I'll let you address it.
It all started with an article by Arthur Staple in the Athletic, who opened that the Rangers could be interested in Trent Frederick, and they could attach a name like Brendan Ostman to Chris Kreider to help dump Kreider's contract. I don't believe it. I think he was just writing an opinion piece, and then a vlogger who I believe his name is Rangers Digest on YouTube did a whole thing on YouTube about it. I don't believe it. Like, if Brendan Ostman is in the deal, I take it. If I'm Don Sweeney, I take it and I run, and I don't ask any questions.
Right.
If I'm the Rangers, I wouldn't do it. No. I'd rather attach a draft pick to Kreider to dump his salary than to trade Brendan Ostman. That's my opinion.
The part that I don't get is why. First of all, the Rangers have started to turn things around. And everyone says, oh, well, they want to dump the Kreider contract. The Kreider contract next year and the year after only get better because the cap is skyrocketing so much.
Yeah, but Chris, it's not about next year. If they want to go after somebody now,
they have $16.4 million right now.
Chris, if they want to make a legitimate play at Rantanen or Marner, they need to do it now. Okay, so
they have the space already to do that.
No, you're not following. They're just, I don't know why you never let me finish.
Go ahead.
What if they want to make a play at both? Because everybody wants to go play in New York.
At both Rantanen and Marner, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So you dump Kreider to Boston plus a high-level prospect to bring in Trent Frederick. What do you have left to deal for Rantanen and Marner? Your cabinet's empty.
Even if they don't go after him now, they can go after him in free agency. They're not doing it without a plan, Chris. They're not wanting to dump salary just for the fact of dumping salary. It's the New York Rangers that are worth $4 billion. The last thing they're worried about is dumping salary. They have a plan. We don't know what it is, but part of that plan includes dumping Kreider's salary. But it ain't for money.
No, I know. It's for the cap space.
They have a machine down in the basement to print fucking money.
I know. It's called the doors.
So stop thinking of it as a salary dump with no plan, because the Rangers don't operate like that. This isn't Anaheim. This isn't San Jose. This isn't Chicago. This is them wanting to dump Kreider with a plan for something else.
Right. And I get that. Here's the thing, though, with the Rangers, they will already have almost $19 million going into next season in
Less
cap
than the
space.
Bruins. Less than the Bruins.
Okay. During the summer, you can go over by that 10%. Okay. So if your plan is to
Don't explain
massive,
the cap. Don't explain the cap to me.
I'm not done yet. I let you finish. So if your plan is to throw massive contracts at Mitch Marner and at Mikko Rantanen, okay, you have that extra 10% to work with. Wouldn't you want to secure both of those guys first and then dump the salary that you need to?
No, because then you've got teams by a barrel, or teams have got you by a barrel. We've seen the Bruins. It happened to the Bruins having to dump Johnny Boychuk.
They still got a good return for him.
Teams have you by the balls when you use the 10% overage. And even with the 10% overage, that's not enough to get Marner and Rantanen under contract.
You could get one of them locked in, signed first, then make the deal, then sign the other. If you have the confidence in the contract that you're offering. So I'm just not sure getting rid of Chris Kreider at this trade deadline while attaching one of your highest end prospects to do it, or a high end prospect to do it, is the right way of going about that move. That's the part that I've questioned.
Chris, teams always attach assets
like you said,
to dump a salary.
If I'm Don Sweeney, I do it and run.
It's always happened. And I will tell you this about your agree to a contract and sign it later. Neither. That's basically what you said. You can agree to the contract and then sign it later. You could sign one, agree to the contract with the other, and sign it later. Teams and players don't operate that way because David Pastrnak will tell you you can step off a curb and sprain your leg, or you can walk off a curb and break your leg and never be able to play again, and you've just lost $120 million.
If you know the terms roughly of the contract and you are going to be within the realm of signing it, that is when you're able to make the move for Kreider. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you do it and then wait a week and then sign them. You can do it all in the same day. You can submit all three things to the league in the same day. So, anyways, Kevin says that Sweeney needs to go to Marchand and inform him that he's going to be moved and ask him a couple places where he wants to go and let him know where they will do their best to get him there. What are your thoughts on moving on from Marchand? Actively moving on from him.
I don't believe he's going anywhere.
Would you move on from him, though?
If that's what he wants. I've been very clear about this for 10 episodes now.
I know you haven't changed.
So, like, my opinion doesn't change from minute to minute, day to day, like a lot of fans. So I'll say what I've said forever now. The only time I move Brad Marchand is if Brad Marchand comes to me and says, I want to be traded.
Which maybe the Four Nation Faceoff puts that bug in his ear. Who knows?
Or maybe, as he told a real broadcast like Sportsnet, he ain't going anywhere.
I agree. I don't think he wants to. All I'm saying is it's possible that the Four Nation Faceoff gets the bug in his ear where he thinks about it. I just don't see him committing to it.
I don't think he will.
I think he wants to stay in Boston, and I think he'll do what we saw Patrice Bergeron do and take smaller deals. He's eligible for bonus contracts, right? Going forward. So I would absolutely talk to him about doing that. I know people aren't going to be happy with carried over cap hits, but
there won't be carried over cap hits if the bonus fits in under the cap.
Exactly. So let's see. Cam then says another question. Would you like Kreider in Boston?
No.
I don't think he solves any of your problems. So
I don't want him simply because of the 2 years left. But I'll tell you what, if if the Rangers, let's just assume there's something behind this rumor. If the Rangers are attaching Brendan Osman, then I'm making the deal. But otherwise, I don't want Chris Kreider.
Right. Let's see. Michael says it seems Boston are at the point where they stand pat past the deadline. I don't think Boston's going to make very many moves. I think they might make one or two smaller moves. A Trent Frederick piece maybe. I think the biggest piece they move on from might be a Morgan Geekie.
I don't know why they would move on from Geekie. I wouldn't understand. It'd have to be an overpayment.
All I'm saying is I think that might be the biggest name on the list of who they would move on from. I'm not looking to move him. I would move Justin Brazeau and I would look to move Trent Frederick. Those are the two main guys that I would be looking to deal away right now.
Yeah.
And if you can walk away with, I don't know, a combination of a second and a third, I'm okay with it.
I'm fine with that too.
So, and it opens up a couple roster spots. We talked about that after the deadline. You're able to call up 4 guys who, as long as they fit under the cap, which the Bruins will have plenty of cap space to do that. We mentioned Poitras will still be up here. So with Poitras, assuming Callahan and Poitras come back up, once Lindholm is healthy, what's the roster move that you make to get back to the roster limit, assuming he's back before the trade deadline?
I'm leaving Callahan in Providence.
Okay. If they need him because Hampus isn't ready for another 2 weeks.
Oh, I thought you said when Hampus is ready, who's the player you send down?
Yeah, if it takes Hampus another 2 weeks to be ready.
Callahan's the one going down. I'm look,
okay.
This close to trade deadline, why risk putting anybody on waivers when you never know when somebody might be calling for one of your players for a depth piece?
I think the only player that you don't have to worry about would be Oliver Wahlstrom. And even then, if someone decides to claim him off waivers, it's not a huge loss for you.
Okay, but I wouldn't risk it because somebody might offer me a 7th round pick, and a 7th round pick is worth more than nothing.
Absolutely. We've seen a couple. We got a few that we'll talk about tomorrow. So, but actually, I was going to ask you too. What did you think of the line of Poitras, Wahlstrom, and Frederick before the break, and how they were starting to play?
I thought they were doing well.
I did too. I thought Wahlstrom was starting to kind of find a little bit of a groove there.
Yeah, forgetting the fight he had against, I forget who it was against. Who did he fight?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look. I know what you're talking about, though.
I thought he was more engaged physically. He was involved more in puck battles. He was getting to the inside, which is a serious issue for this team. Getting to the inside and getting to the net. So, like, I had no issue with it. Frederick, I don't know. It's so up and down. I think he's at his best when he's with Poitras, to be honest with you. Poitras makes him keep his feet moving. How can you be Trent Frederick and watch a 20-year-old kid go over the boards and work his ass off like Poitras does, and go out there and be lazy, for a lack of a better term? So Poitras brings out the best in Frederick just because of that.
I just don't know if you can keep Frederick because you're going to keep Poitras up. I don't think there's a long-term viability there. So I agree with you 100% that Frederick has looked his best with Poitras. And I liked the line that we had last year when it was Frederick on the left, Poitras in the middle, and Geeky on the right. That was a good line.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind a run with that line as well, but then that opens up who's going to be the left wing on the first line. You don't have anybody to plug in for Geeky right now.
And eventually, Poitras's going to outplay them, and he's going to be moving up.
Right. I think you're looking at Poitras taking over as your 2C next year.
Oh, I don't think it'll be next year. Maybe the year after.
Maybe the year after. Although the kid works hard enough, he could earn it next year.
Yeah.
So, but it's... I don't want to see a line as much as the skill wise you want to see Zacha, Poitras, and Pastrnak. I just don't see that line being it's just too easy to knock them off the puck, in my opinion, as a physical group. You know what I mean? You put a Sam Bennett line out against them, and they're not able to outwork that group. If that makes sense.
I don't know. I don't think Zacha's that easy to knock off pucks. I don't think Poitras's that easy to knock off of pucks.
Would you like that line, Zacha, Poitras, and Pastrnak?
When? In 2 years? Yeah.
Okay. What about next year?
No. I just finished saying I don't think he's ready for number 2 role next year. Why would he be ready for number 1?
So I think the rest of this season you're going to look at a lot of combinations.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. No. Chris, they're fighting for a playoff spot. Now's not the time to be experimenting.
If they're fighting for a playoff spot now, they move on from a Frederick and or Brazeau. What kind of message do you think that sends based on what they bring in? I think that would change, no?
Well, yeah, but look, when management makes a move, you're not sending any uncoded messages to the dressing room. The dressing room know. The players know. A young player like Mason Lohrei or Matt Poitras may need something explained to them. But the veterans, the guys that have been in the league, understand that it's a business. And they understand, they know Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Hampus Lindholm, Elias Lindholm, Morgan Geeky, go up and down the lineup. They know why the Bruins would trade Trent Frederick. They don't. You might have to explain it to Lohrei and Poitras, but the rest of the dressing room knows.
Do you think it sends a different message based on what they bring in to replace Trent Frederick in that deal?
No.
Like a draft pick versus a similar type of NHL player?
No. The players know that they probably exhausted all opportunities to sign him, and Trent didn't want to resign, so they needed to move him. They know the game. They know it's a business. They don't need it explained.
Let's see. I'm with you. Big Bad Joe says that they need a big retool. In my opinion, it's a 2-year retool, no choice. I don't know. I don't know if it would take 2 years to redo what this team needs. I mean, think about what their biggest holes were last year. What would you say last year their biggest holes were?
Defense.
Okay. And a centerman.
And a centerman.
And they got the best 2 players on the market for those 2 positions.
I don't think it'll take 2 years because of this. A lot of players are underachieving this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the norm. So expect a bounce back season from a lot of players, a full season of Hampus Lindholm. Um, and already you've got an improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. I think going into next year, you're looking at starting with possibly Geeky Zaka Pasternak. Unless there's a move out there that we don't see. I don't know. There aren't very many top 6 left wingers who are going to be made available. And where was it? Here was someone made the comment. Yeah, Brendan did. He said, get ready for the Sam Bennett overpay in the offseason. We saw Steven Stamkos get a big deal. We saw Brandon Montour got a big deal from Seattle. I mean, we saw a couple massive contracts last year that some have worked, some haven't. Jonathan Marchessault was another one that Nashville brought in. I don't know if you're going to overpay for a guy like Sam Bennett. I mean, you might pay for him in the long term as an overpayment, but he's going to get the max term, and he's going to get a high dollar amount, and he's going to be worth it for most of the contract. What do you think, Dom?
I think so too. It's, you can't plan on players like the comment there about Jack Eichel. Okay,
sign Jack Eichel long term in the summer of 2026. Who said
I heard this the last time he was a free agent. That never happened. I heard Noah Hannafin was going to be a Bruin this year because Boston wants to go back to Boston. Never happened.
I heard Leon Draisaitl was going to be a Bruin.
Yeah, you hear so many times, and it just never happens. Just because the guy's from the Boston area doesn't mean they want to go back home and play.
Yeah. Not to mention that's assuming that the Golden Knights don't re-sign Eichel already by that point. I mean, I think a lot of people forget Jack Eichel is only 28. His contract, he'll be under 30.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, they can still sign him to another 8 years.
Correct.
So his contract is going to be what? 8 years, $15 million? And not because his contract is up after next season.
Right.
So you're talking about an 8-year contract that they can offer for, let's say, $15 million?
Yeah.
So let me just do a little number crunching because Boston wouldn't have the 8th year. You'd have to come up with $120 million over 7 seasons, which would end up being 17.1, just to match what Vegas could reasonably offer him. Now, the salary cap is going up, but do you want to sign a guy who's going to be signed till he's 38 years old for $17 million?
I think Eichel will age well, but the money's irrelevant. The chances that those players ever make it to free agency are slim and none.
It just doesn't happen.
I mean, you see what happens to, unless you're in Boston, you see what happens to those type of players. They get traded.
Mm-hmm.
Hannafin gets traded, re-signed. Go back to Mark Stone, gets traded, re-signed. Alex Pietrangelo gets traded, re-signed.
Who's the one from Vegas that went to the Islanders? Was it? I want to say it was Brock Besser.
I don't know, but players of that caliber, they get traded and they get re-signed. They very, very rarely make it to free agency.
Yeah, and I think people are looking at Mikko Rantanen's situation saying he's going to hit free agency, but I just think some of it was they were waiting for the tournament to come through. They've already said they're going to make a run for him. and they wanted to let him get settled in first. So this tournament might settle him in, help him find his game, and he'll probably re-sign in Carolina. So, yes, if Mikko Rantanen hits the market, you absolutely make a run at the guy. 100%. He's got to hit the market first. Big Brad Bruin Joe says they need at least 3 top 6 players. Now, I'm not sure if he means they need 3 more or they need to have 3 on the roster and they don't. I mean, I would put it. Pasternak is definitely on the list. So there's one right there. Do you have anybody else?
I think he means 3 more, Chris.
That's what I'm thinking, but
it's obvious.
3 top 6 players aren't going to be available. That's the thing. Nikki says, Carlo, Coyle, Freddie, trade them now. Sacco's good coach, too soft 10 years like a buddy to players. Sweeney, Neely, fire them.
Okay. Buy the team off of Jeremy Jacobs and do all that.
Or go do it in NHL 25.
Because I don't see all that happening.
No. Freddie, sure. That one, trade you. That's realistic. Fine. Carlo, there's no need to move on from him. We already talked about him. And Coyle, I mean, thoughts on moving on from Coyle? He was one that we hadn't gotten to yet.
If you had a team that was close to a Stanley Cup, like who are give me your number one contender from the East and number one contender from the West.
Who would trade for him?
No. For the Cup, Chris.
Oh, I mean, right now I would argue Florida and Washington are the top 2.
No. Give me your number one from the East and number one from the West. Not top 2.
Let's say Washington and Winnipeg. They're the best 2 teams in the league right now.
Okay. So if you're Carolina or you're Vegas or Edmonton and think you have a run at beating Washington and beating Winnipeg, I could see you being interested in Charlie Coyle.
Yes, I agree.
Now, the question is, do any of those teams have room for him? Is he an improvement on what they already have? Because the other teams, they sure ain't going to be interested if they don't think they have a legit chance. Because he's not a rental. It's for one more year.
Right. Bruin Joe says Vegas for the West, Florida for the East. But the idea, the whole point that you're making, though, I agree with. He's not a rental. So most teams, I mean, who's going to be looking at him for next season is the other question. How does he fit in for them next year in addition to this year? I guess maybe in New Jersey, but I'd have to look into that a little bit more.
Then it becomes an off-season move.
Right. That's what I mean. And it's an off-season move. Like, maybe same thing with Minnesota. I'd put them on the list. The Kings I could put on that list. I mean, Colorado maybe looks at it and says, even though we're in a wild card spot, we can compete with anybody else in the West now that their goaltending is fixed. But as BG says here, Coyle screams off-season move if there was one. Him, Korpisalo's another one. Those are all guys that you move in the offseason. Tyler says that Toronto would love him, but they can't afford him. I mean, that's the other thing, too, is you got to look at their cap situation this season. Can they bring him in? I don't see Coyle being moved unless it's the offseason. David says, any truth to the rumor number 25 is available? I think there's a difference between someone being available and someone being asked about. I think everybody's available for the right cost. It's just a matter of make it make sense for the Bruins. I don't think there are very many players that Don Sweeney is picking up the phone saying, "Hey, I'm shopping this player. What would you give me for him?"
I think Sweeney has already had a large volume of conversations. He knows what's available. Everybody knows what he's willing to deal. And now it's just a matter of time to seeing what falls into place.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's going to end up being a very slow deadline for Boston. Kevin says you have to look at who's got value to a contender. In my opinion, there's only three: Marchand, Geeky, and Frederick. Which, let's go off of that list of names, Kevin. I'm not moving Marchand unless he asks for it. Like Dom said, I agree with you on that one wholeheartedly. And with the fact that I have signing rights on Morgan Geeky, I'm not moving him this year unless I'm blown away by an offer. So Frederick is the only one on that list that I'm looking to move on from.
And then only if he's unwilling to sign for what you feel is a reasonable price.
Right. And I know the last update we got was they were closing the gap, I believe was the term that you used.
Yeah, that was a few weeks ago.
That was a few weeks ago, though. So I don't know if we've gotten anything new since then. I don't think so. But clearly the two sides have had a conversation. They know where they stand. And closing the gap could mean they're $1 million apart. It could mean they're $5 million apart.
Yeah.
If you're closer to $1 million apart, I can see them hanging on to him and trying to work it out. If they're closer to the $5 million distance, then he's getting his ass traded.
Mm-hmm.
I really think, based on the track record, guys that we've talked about before, Jake DeBrusk, they wanted to re-sign him. He clearly made his decision that he didn't want to be here. So not moving on from him was a mistake. But a guy like Torrey Krug, they wanted to re-sign him. Dan Heinen, they wanted to re-sign. They were close in most of those cases. They just weren't close enough. And then the talks went to shit in the instance of Torrey Krug. So this is a very good question.
I'm going to give a shameless plug out to someone though first.
Go ahead. Then we'll get to David's question.
Capwages.com and click on the Bruins. They now have AFP analytics on there. So if you click on the Bruins and go to a player, let's say Brad Marchand, and just hold your cursor over UFA, it'll tell you that AFP projects his contract at 3 years, $7,802,350 per year.
I think that's way off.
So do I. But they project John Beecher at, I'm going to laugh. I laugh every time I do this. $1,824,050. Yeah.
For two seasons.
For 2 seasons. Here's my response to that. John Beecher, here's your qualifying offer of $874,000. Justin Brazeau is at 2 years, $1.4 million. Cole Koepke, 1 year at $1.17 million. And Mason Lohrei, 2 years at $3.1 million. If you're interested in crap like that, it's there on capwages.com.
I'm familiar with AFP analytics. They do a lot of hard work. They're sometimes accurate with their projections, or
they're never accurate.
They're sometimes close, but honestly, you do this enough, you're more likely to get, because like the Brad Marchand one, for instance, I followed them enough to know that they have a short-term and a long-term deal option, mostly for the RFAs. So like Morgan Geeky, for instance, this is their long-term, quote-unquote, 4-year offer, but then they have a 1-year offer, which would be much less because, he's an RFA. But But in the context of the way cap wages is set it up, it doesn't make any sense. And it's way off. I wouldn't agree with that Marchand number at all. I think he's going to take – there's no way Boston does a 3-year deal on him. And as Michael says, $7.8 million seems way too much. Why are you giving Brad Marchand a raise if you know he's willing to take what's left on the table because he's made that known to you because he wants to stay here?
I just anyway, go back to David's question.
Let's come up with our own contract predictions for the Bruins. Who walks, who stays, and see who's more accurate, us or AFP. I'm not saying right now.
Let's not.
Real quick, Kevin says that
I got enough
needs to have
work
the balls the way he did in 2015 for that retool. But David's question, he says, how important are player agents for players asking to be moved? Do you want to explain a little bit of the process of how a player, let's say it is Trent Frederick. All right. Team wants him to stick around. He wants to stick around, but they're not close on a contract.
Unless the player is approached by management first. In other words, in your example, Don Sweeney approaching Trent Frederick, all conversations between the player, all conversations a player wants to initiate with the GM should be through his agent.
That's why you hire one.
Yeah.
If you're
look, can I tell a story?
Of course, we love your stories.
This pertains to a Bruins player who was playing in the Ontario Hockey League. I've told this story before, and maybe now in this context, it'll make a lot more sense. I got a phone call one morning from the player's father saying we're going to demand a trade out of what I don't want to name the team, but from the team he was playing for. And I'm like, whoa, wait, you can't do that. Well, what do you mean we can't do that? Don't like the way my son's being treated and blah, blah, blah. The Bruins had already drafted him at this point. And I said to him, I'm not going to mention his name. I said, this is the way you need to deal with it. You need to approach the Bruins first. Let the Bruins approach his team and say, would like you to try and move the player. But don't you call, have your agent call. And I gave him the example of where the Bruins were pissed off because they had another player that had requested a trade in the OHL without going to the Bruins, and the Bruins were not too happy about it. Always have your agent initiate the conversation with management.
Kevin says, is this the same kid who complained because he wasn't drafted before? I believe it was Jake DeBrusk.
No, different player. Different player.
Which is why when and with tomorrow's prospect show, we'll talk about him a lot. We'll talk about a lot of the guys in the system, but a guy like Ty Gallagher, when he moves from Boston University all the way out to Colorado, the Bruins were in on it. Dean Letourneau going straight to Boston College, skipping the USHL. The Bruins were in that discussion. Those things don't happen without the Bruins signing off on it and being okay with it. Now, if they're not okay with it, then they're going to step in and intervene and assist the player to say, okay, this might be a better move, and here's why. Or if the player is that insistent and the player is not wanted by the team anymore because they think they're making a bad decision, then they'll find a way to cut bait with the team. Maybe they'll include him in a trade. But the NHL team is involved in all of that player movement.
Yeah, Fabian Lysell going to the Vancouver Giants. Scott Bradley lives in Vancouver, associated with the Giants, and I believe Lysel's agent uh, is somehow involved with the Giants, and the Bruins worked to get him to go play junior there. Did the same thing with Loki Johansson in Moncton. The NHL teams are involved in where a player goes to continue his development.
Yeah. And then David asks, any player agents that you like versus ones that you dislike? I think you're going to get a mixed bag just with anything else, with any other profession. You know,
I like all agents. I have never had a bad encounter with an agent. I believe it was 2010, 2011. I was doing a profile on a player for the NHL draft. Mike Liute was his agent. So I sent Mike an email saying if there was a time he was available that he could talk, and I could give him a call. Didn't respond to my email. Within 5 minutes, he called me, and we talked for a good half hour on the player. I heard this horn honking. I says, "Where are you?" He says, "Oh, I'm on the highway on my way to I forget where it was now." I could tell you a bunch of stories like that with agents, and the time they've shared with me. So I don't have a bad thing to say about any agent, really.
Yeah, and I think one of the aspects of having a good relationship with an agent, with a player's agent, is realizing that, or understanding from that agent's perspective, they're doing what they can to look out for their client. Their client is the number one priority.
Yeah.
And that's it. Just like Gary Bettman's priority is the overall status of the league, not one particular owner. An ownership group status, or most important factor, is the overall status of his organization. If you come at it looking at it from some other perspective, you won't get along with anybody. David asks, what about Alan Eagleson?
Obviously, Eagleson did some pretty bad and illegal things. But prior to that, Eagleson did a lot to grow the game. That's not to condone what he did. But in Eagleson's days, I was just a teenager. No, I wasn't. I was approaching my early 20s, so I wasn't dealing with agents at that time of my life. So I never had a dealing with Alan Eagleson. So I can't say I like or dislike my dealings with him because I haven't had any.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit different when you actually commit illegal acts.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to say to that. I mean, nice people can commit crimes too. So I don't know where else you want to go with that one, but let me just take a look real quick. We got when do the Bruins play again between now and our next show?
I don't know. I haven't even looked.
I know. That's why I'm going to pull it up real quick and see, because we got Thursday is the final, and then Saturday we have a loaded schedule, and the Bruins play the Ducks.
Quack, quack.
And they don't have a back-to-back, so we'll have our show after one game, and then they play the Leafs in Boston on Tuesday. So we'll actually have our prospect show before then too. So one game between now and our next three shows. I mean, Bruins opening up after the breakout home against one of the worst road teams in the league. Can't ask for a better situation than that.
Yeah, if I may, for those of you that tune in to the Prospect Show on Mondays, just to prepare you for tomorrow night, I have started doing a write-up on each and every Providence player and their path so far, their scouting report, and potential future path to the NHL. I think I got half a dozen of the players done now, maybe 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Done so far. We got something like close to 30 highlights to show you for tomorrow night. So if anybody wants to go take a look at those write-ups, Dom.Hockey. If you can find just one of them, it's linked to all the other players. I know I've had a couple of agents retweet them for their clients. I had a couple of Bruins amateur scouts retweet it to their followers on Twitter. So
Yeah.
Give it a look.
The pieces are coming along great, Dom. I've read them and they're awesome work. Cam says I feel like Chris Pelosi will be a hot topic tomorrow.
Yeah, everybody's hot because he's got 11 points in 11 games, but nobody's talking about Ryan Walsh, who had 6 points in 2 games on the weekend.
And then Michael asks, will Mason Langenbrunner or Ty Gallagher get an ELC?
I'm still not sure about Langenbrunner. I think Gallagher will.
I don't know if Gallagher will get an ELC. It might come as an AHL contract. We'll have to see based on other decisions that they make because they only got 5 contract spots. But I do think Gallagher gets signed by the organization in some way, shape, or form.
Well, they only have 5 for this year. He could sign an ATO for this year and a contract for next year.
Right. Again, I'm not sure how it's going to happen, what way it'll play out, but he'll be in Providence next year. That's a prediction that I have. So, and then Langenbrunner, I'm not sure, but I think he might end up with an ATO.
Well, he's the assistant general manager's son, so you never know.
Yeah. Matrix saying, have a good night. He's been on a 5-day vacation, snowmobile bender. So,
Matrix, where do you live? Because through the night ending this morning, we had 13 inches of snow. And between now and Tuesday morning, depending on where the snow squall stops, because it's supposed to stop somewhere in its path, we could get another 30 to 60 centimeters, which is 2.5 centimeters to an inch is another 12 to 24 inches of snow.
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you, you'd be loving the snow up here in Ontario for snowmobiling right now. I haven't seen this much snow since the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, down here we're supposed to be getting a good chunk of it, but right now today a lot of it converted to rain. So we're gonna get a lot of frozen crap overnight. So let's see. Matrix says he's up in Maine. So
yeah, we got a foot last night and another foot to 2 feet coming by Tuesday morning.
Cam says, do you see the Bruins signing Gleb Veremyov?
Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of interest there. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. I mentioned it on one of the pods that Don Sweeney, Adam McQuaid, and I believe it was Evan Gold went down to see Colorado College. Oh, Brett Harkins, NCAA, the head NCAA scout for the Bruins, were down there having a look. Obviously, Ty Gallagher plays on that team. It's probably why McQuaid was there, but Harkins doesn't go to scout players that are already drafted. He goes to scout undrafted or free agent players.
Yeah, and they could use another center in the system. So, you know,
Dynamic player.
yeah. Let's see. David wants to know, has Tufty earned another shot?
He's playing well. I think he had another goal today, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
15 goals, 12 assists, 27 points in 39 games for Providence. It's been one of their better forwards, aggressive.
I'm pretty sure he's already under contract for next year.
Yes, he's on a one-year deal.
I was thinking VL.
VL's under contract for next year?
Yeah, he was a 2-year, $775 contract.
Wow.
So, but he's been playing well down in Providence, so that might not be a bad thing.
Can you ask Kevin, or I guess I can ask him, why I scared him?
Yeah, I saw that. I'm not sure why or what we were talking about when I saw that comment. So, I mean, you're just a scary guy, Dom. Come on.
Boo.
Let's see. Matrix says he would love to get up there. Leaving Tuesday for Fort Ken, Maine for another 6 days. Wow. Good for you.
Do some ice fishing while you're there.
Right. Real quick, Kevin says his final thoughts of the stream. Get out your feelings. This is a business. Do what's right for the future of the organization. And in all caps, trade Marchand. I don't think it's just a feelings thing, though, Kevin. I really don't. I think he's got, because you quacked loudly. That's why you scared him. I don't think trading Marchand helps this team going forward, because you're going to be able to get him on such a good contract going forward. And he still has value. His game hasn't fallen off a cliff. So.
No, it hasn't.
And would you consider, as you get younger, you're ideally getting better in your forward group, would you consider playing Marchand in a third line role?
Well, if I had players above him, yeah, I would. Why not?
Well, because there was a lot of talk about moving guys like Krejci or Bergeron down the lineup, which just never made sense to me. So I just figured I'd ask you about Marchand.
Brad Marchand is in a tournament right now, and a best on best. He's considered one of the top 4 left wingers in Canada to be on that team.
Mm-hmm. I know. You don't have to convince me.
But you asked me.
I know. I'm asking because someone else out there is going to want to know. Cam says they need a play driver for Marchand at this stage. He can still play, but he isn't going to be able to drive a line.
It's funny you say that, Cam, because last year, and the year before, I talked a lot how at times Jake DeBrusk drove that line. People said Jake DeBrusk is not a line driver. Yeah, with his speed and his ability to push defensemen back, he was a driver on that line at times. And when he was putting up points. Mm-hmm. That's the type of player they need. I think the hope was that Fabian Lysell could turn into that player. And it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see.
I know if we're talking about people for tomorrow, Fabian Lysell will probably come up quite a bit for tomorrow's show. So
game on his stick today, 2-2 tie, penalty shot.
I saw.
Couldn't finish.
Came close, but couldn't finish. Bruin Joe says that's why they need to trade him, because they will not be in playoffs, and if you want to bring him back this summer. Okay. I hear this all the time. Trade the player and then re-sign him again in the offseason and bring him back. When's the last time that fucking happened?
Keith Tkachuk.
So over 20 years ago.
Doesn't mean it can't happen.
Doesn't mean it can't happen, but I hear it like it's this thing that happens all the fucking time. It doesn't happen all the time. It's a rarity.
No, it doesn't.
It's not the rule. Like, but people talk about it like it's the easiest thing since, you know, going to the store to get a sliced piece of bread. So I hear that option all the time, and I'm like, it just doesn't happen. You're talking about something that happens once. How many times before Kachuk, other than Kachuk, when was the last time it happened before that?
Oh, I'd have to think about it. It's not information I have off the top of my head.
Okay. my point still stands. It doesn't happen ever. Like, you're talking about something that hasn't happened in 20 some odd years. What makes you think Brad Marchand's going to be the next one? Let's see. Marchand, 20 goals, 24 assists, 5 game-winning goals, 2 overtime goals. Trade him at your peril for me. 63 stays forever, however long he wants.
Exactly.
Yeah. Again, he's not going anywhere unless he asks for it. So
showing loyalty to Brad Marchand at this point sends a message across the league that the Bruins are loyal to their players.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the Bruins were after a player in free agency, and the only other team after that going after that player were the Vegas Golden Knights. And the player had only those 2 options to weigh over. Who holds more value? The Bruins who show loyalty, or the Vegas Golden Knights who may trade you at the next best player that becomes available?
Yeah, there is something to be said for that a lot. Now, let's see. Deadline or summer, Bruins need to add top 6 playmaking center and a middle 6 forward that can put the puck in the net somewhat consistently. I mean, you're talking about making the team better. That's what they have to do. So, real quick, though, I did want to ask you, and this is my last question for you. I know we're just a little after 8 already. Again, I was listening to a different show, and they were talking about concerns about prospects in the system, mostly the college guys, but just in general, some of the college guys that aren't signed yet to contracts. So your Gallaghers, your Yelviks, so on and so forth. We were just talking about the loyalty factor with a guy like Brad Marchand. Are you at all concerned about this team not being able to sign prospects now or in the future because of the way they are developing guys like Fabian Lysell or Georgi Merkulov, that they're in Providence for so long that they're quote unquote not getting a shot at the NHL. And so prospects are going to look at that and say, I'd rather sign somewhere else.
No, doesn't concern me one bit.
Could you explain
players? Look, over the years, I've talked to literally thousands of hockey players, and I mean thousands. They know, players understand what they are. They understand what their limits are. They understand what kind of hockey players they are, so on and so forth. Vinny Lettieri, for example, knows he's a career AHLer. They'll get spot duty in the NHL. So the next time his contract comes up, if he signs with the Anaheim Ducks, he knows more than likely he's going to end up in the AHL. So why not stay in Boston for Providence and help work with the kids? That's just one example. But these players know what they are. And let's face it, what is it? 32 teams, 224 players get drafted every year. Okay. Another 2 handfuls are signed as free agents. So we're looking at 250 players coming into the system every year in the NHL. In 10 years, or what do you think the average career of an NHL player is?
The average is probably close to like 4.5 years.
Okay, let's say 5 years. Okay, so 5 years, that means that 1,100 players have been brought into the NHL system. That could include the American Hockey League. There's 700 and some odd, almost 800 NHL players on the roster or in the NHL. So every 4 years, there just isn't room for all these players that are being drafted.
Mm-hmm.
There just isn't room for them. They know, even though they're drafted, it's a long shot to make an NHL team, whether it be the Boston Bruins or whether it be the Anaheim Ducks. It's a long shot. They understand it.
That, and if their agent or advisor, because they're pretty much the same freaking thing at this point, if they're doing their job correctly, they know whether or not they should be expecting an NHL ELC, an AHL tryout, or they're going to, hey, you're done in college, but they want to sign you for the Maine Mariners and then see you work your way up, and here's why. Like, that's where the communication, and I know people want to shit all over Don Sweeney for everything, but that right there is the type of respect that he has earned around the league that has put him so highly regarded that he gets picked to GM a Canadian team. Because players that are in the system, your Yelviks, your Gallaghers, your, Fabian Liesells, they know exactly where they stand. If they don't, then that's on their agent. And they know what they need to do to get to the next level. If Fabian Liesel was so upset right now that he's not in the Boston Bruins, we would be hearing that he's demanding a trade. Mm-hmm. He knows he has to work on his game. He knows what he needs to do, and he knows what the benchmarks are to get another call-up. If he didn't, this would be a much bigger issue within the organization, and Don Sweeney would be gone. But because the clarity is there, that's why he's so respected.
Wasn't it Zach Senyshyn who asked for a trade?
He asked for a trade
twice.
Well, Jake DeBrusk also asked for a trade.
No. Jake DeBrusk was in the NHL.
But yes.
Zach Senyshyn was never in the NHL.
Right. He was fighting for a spot in the NHL. He wasn't getting the call.
Trade.
He had suffered some injuries. He asked for a trade, and now he's playing over in Germany.
Right.
Good for him. All right.
Like you said. But I will tell you, most players in their position, they will look at it and say, which team is going to give me the best opportunity to develop my game and give me the time needed to make the NHL? Because look, they're either on a 3-year entry-level college or contract. If we're talking college players, it's only 1 or 2 years. Okay? Which team is going to give me the opportunity to allow me to develop my game fully to make it to the NHL? And chances are Bruins are way up here on that list because they're not in a rush to rush their products. They could go to Anaheim, and Anaheim will say in 2 years, you haven't developed far enough, we're going to let you go. And not sign this another contract, and then the poor kid can't sign up anywhere else. The Bruins don't operate that way.
What the Bruins have established under Don Sweeney, like everybody wants to talk about, you build your team through the draft, you draft and develop, you draft and develop. Don Sweeney has built an organization that can draft and develop while keeping an NHL roster competitive. Now, is every prospect going to hit and be a home run? No, that's just like you said, you do the math. It's just not going to happen. All right. And Cam, I know you're laughing about Zach Senyshyn playing over in Germany. He's actually playing really well over there. If you've watched him, he's playing well. He's producing over there. It's not the NHL, and that's fine. All right. Guy's gonna have a good, solid pro German hockey career. Good for him. Okay. But a player like Dean Letourneau, all right, the Ducks aren't drafting him because they're drafting so high. Now, Boston is able to take him. It's going to be a multi-year development in college and then a couple years in the minors, and then he'll be a Boston Bruin. That is the expectation. The player can adjust that. We've talked about that plenty on the prospect show, how a player can adjust their timeline. Ty Gallagher is a great example, right? You looked at him and you said, okay, he's a 7th-round pick, long shot for the NHL. Well, 4 years in college have done that kid wonders. He is going to get some form of a tryout agreement or contract to be in Providence next season. From there, can he continue his growth? If he can, he'll get to the NHL. If he can't, then that's where his career ends.
I'll talk more about this tomorrow. But the advantage Ty Gallagher has over plenty of college players is he's doing what he's doing, and he had to fight through adversity.
Yep.
And that was his season last year at BU, where he got very, very little playing time as a 7th defenseman to being his team's nominee for the Hobey Baker Award this season.
Yeah, he leads his team in multiple offensive categories from the blue line.
He's faced adversity, which a lot of players his age don't face yet. So that gives him a big advantage.
Mm-hmm. Cam asks, do you see Lacelle or Merkulov getting more games with the Bruins this year, or do you feel that's not happening due to the Bruins situation this year? I'll let you take that one first.
I think they will, Cam. I think they'll get some time. Depending on what they do at trade deadline, they'll get a long look. I'm of the belief that they have to give them a long look so that they know what they have in the two players at the NHL level, because that answers questions as to what they have to do in free agency come July 1st. Very big on that. I firmly believe that that's the route they should take. How much time? I don't know, because what worries me is that they're still going to be fighting for a playoff spot, and they should. If there's a chance, they should be playing for it. I think it would be good for both players to get them in this situation, or get them in playing in this situation where they're fighting for playoff lives. As long as they're on the Providence roster on trade deadline day, which is what I'm sure they're going to do with Matthew Poitras, send him down and call him back up, then they're eligible to play in the AHL playoffs. So if the big club doesn't make it, they can go down to Providence and still get playoff experience.
Yeah, I think they'll do that with Poitras, and you may end up seeing them, try and do that with a guy like Wahlstrom too. If they don't move off from him at the deadline, they may try and get him through waivers just to see if they can get him some time down there.
Yeah, like you've got to look. Mason Leroy has had what? 13 games of playoff experience in the NHL.
Sounds right.
Matt Poitras hasn't had any. I believe in his whole career, Matt Poitras has only had 9 playoff game experience. That's not counting stuff like the OHL Cup or anything like that, which is a AAA under 16 level. But I think through his career, he's had 9 playoff games under his belt from junior on up to the NHL.
Yeah, if you can get him some Calder Cup playoff games, you do.
Yeah. Jeremy Swayman, he's not going to Providence because he'll never get through waivers. But he's had
No.
what? 15 games of playoff experience in his career? 14?
Something like that. That sounds about right. And granted, he's been thrown in the fire a couple times in the
Yeah.
NHL. You got 12 games last year, 2 the year before, 5 the year before, 1 the year before, and then before that, it was all the way back when he was with the Pikes Peak Miners 18U AAA team in 15-16. So
Yeah. So it'd be nice to get him some more playoff experience. Playoff experience is very, very valuable for players. Very valuable.
absolutely. But yeah, I agree. I think you'll see them a little bit. That playoff position is going to really dictate a lot of what they see. I think as long as they're fighting for a playoff spot, that is the organization's number one priority. But I also think, again, that communication that we talked about, the players know that and they understand that. Now, that doesn't mean in the offseason, a guy like Merkulov says, okay, I'm going to go back home to Russia because I can still play there. I can still make good money there, and I can be home with my family there and have a decent career. But that doesn't mean it's also the wrong move right now, because Merkulov is not going to be the piece that puts you into the playoffs.
Right. I'll tell you another guy I'd like to see get a chance is John Farinacci.
Yep. I know you've talked a lot about him, and we've talked a lot about him on the Prospect Show. It's the same reason why if you make the NHL playoffs, you call a guy like Patrick Brown up, because he is a veteran of the NHL game. So there's a lot of other things to take into account for the roster moves and the lineup moves. But this team has a very easy schedule overall going forward, ranked schedule. Let me be clear on that. They can make it a problem for themselves, and we've seen them do that all year. So I'm not discounting that. But the teams around him in the standings have very difficult schedules going forward as well. So, the Bruins have to play their game, but the playoffs aren't off the table for them. If they start to decline and fall further out of the playoff race, then absolutely, Lysel, Merkulov, they'll start to see a lot more ice time at the NHL level. And yes, Farinacci had a big weekend.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the setup he made to, I'm pretty sure it was Fabian Lysel. No, it was Georgi Merkulov on Saturday. What a pass, man! It was like Crosby to Crosby to McKinnon in the Canada Swedish game on the power play.
Oh man,
it was almost identical, and that's John Farinacci. Superb passer, excellent vision. He's got a great shot, but he's not known as a goal scorer. He's gonna make his bread and butter as a playmaker. But we'll show the highlight tomorrow night. I'm sure it's on Twitter somewhere if anybody wants to look it up.
Or just come here tomorrow and we'll show it to you.
Yeah, or we'll show it to you.
6:30 tomorrow will be all about the prospects. I know we're already running much later than we usually do, but people had questions. So, Dom, any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode of What's Bruin, presented by Ice Shaker? Check them out, iceshaker.com, and get yours today.
Do you have that video I sent you today?
I don't have the whole thing. No, I don't.
Ah, shucks. Told you to have it ready just in case.
I can pull it up, but the topic didn't really come up, so I wasn't
gonna. No, but I just want to end it with this. That's my last comment.
Would you like to explain, and I can pull up the video?
No.
Alrighty. Well, I won't go through the whole process of pulling it up then, but if that's your final thought, Don, the last thing I got is go be